Psalm 139:13, David in prayer to God, Thou hast possessed my reins. The reins there, if you study that word in the King James, has to do with the heart, innermost being. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. Me, a real person, still in his mother's womb, not a fetus, not a blob of tissue, a person. Life begins at conception. I've proven that from the Word of God. I'm not going to stop and run all those references now, but we have a Q&A video where I deal with that. Abortion is murder. Life does begin at conception. And there's many verses to back that up. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully evolved. Evolution is a fairy tale for grown-ups, right? That's what people believe when they deny God and they have to come up with some other option. And it's just ridiculous. It's a theory, and a bad one at that. There's no way we got here accidentally and all this just happened. When you understand what God has created, there's no way it's by chance. There's no way that we got here through a natural process of evolution. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. All right, so how did your soul get here through natural process of evolution? There's no way the human body, as complex as it is, was an accident. But even if you were to try to, fall for that, how do you explain the soul that knows right from wrong? How did evolution have anything to do with that? It's ridiculous. Because there's more to what's real besides the things that are seen. There's also the invisible part and the soul and the spirit. See, that's not physical, but it's real. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. That's figurative language for the womb, because that's the context makes that clear. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, and in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned when as yet there was none of them. Now notice that. He's talking about in his mother's womb, while his body's being formed, before it's finished, yet everything concerning the members of his body is written down in a book. That's what DNA is. Okay? The DNA code was discovered by man in 1952, but it's described right here in the Word of God 3,000 years ago. DNA is the genetic blueprint for physical development. It's information that describes who you are physically. It's a book. DNA is a book. Now, in conception, one cell from the mom combines with one cell from the dad. There's 23 chromosomes. There's one new cell. At conception, the baby is just a single cell that you couldn't see with the naked eye. But that one cell has 3 billion characters of DNA. Now that's a big number. If you started counting and didn't sleep or do anything else but just counted, it would take you 96 years to get to 3 billion. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take you a while. 3 billion is a big, big number. But here's the thing. When you become an adult, you have 75 trillion cells in your human body. 75 trillion. And each one of those has 3 billion characters of DNA. So what's 75 trillion times 3 billion? Well, somebody said this, and I don't know if it's totally accurate, but it kind of helps put it in perspective. If you were to write that out, 75 trillion times 3 billion, all that information, it would go from here to the moon and back 178,000 times. Oh, what an amazing thing evolution is, I mean, you think about the complexity. And if you study in the womb there, how when the baby's formed, just like the eye, and there's like an invisible surgical procedure that makes the eyelid that has to be so precise. How does that even happen? I'll tell you how it happens. God is involved with that. And, a baby being conceived and born is a miracle. It's a wonderful thing. the value of that, and it's just not something to be taken lightly. The wise man said in Ecclesiastes 11 verse 5, as thou knowest not what is the way of the Spirit, you can't explain that, nor how the bones do grow in the womb of her that is with child. Even so thou knowest not the works of God who maketh all. Baby's conceived, 9 months later, a baby's born. If you look at that single cell until it's born, how will that happen? That is miraculous. That's the power of God. David said, you covered me in my mother's womb. Your heart beats 36,972,000 times every year. That's an amazing thought when you think about the 970 miles of blood vessels in your body. You've got 10,000 nerves, 600 muscles, 213 bones. But you start analyzing the human body, when you get into the brain and the human eyes, man has never even come close to something like that in his inventions. And yet you want to say it all happened accidentally without purpose? What a joke, man. Men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil, and the fool hath said in his heart there is no God. The atheist doesn't have a head problem, he's got a heart problem. Denying creation makes you a fool. There's no excuse for that. But Romans said you're without excuse because you could look at the things that God made and see the power of God. And He gave you a conscience. It's written in your heart that there's a God. So there is no excuse. And so you think about the complexity of all this and what God has done. And it's an amazing thing. But do you think I'm stretching it? He said, in thy book all my members were written. That is the members of His body. What book records everything about us physically? God's DNA book. In fact, Jesus said the very hairs of your head are numbered. Don't think that God doesn't know who you are. God can look at a world of 7 or 8 billion people and see you as an individual. And tell He can say how many hairs are on your head. That's a comforting thought for those who know the Lord and love the Lord. And so, by the way, start back in verse 1 in Psalm 139. I'm not going to read the whole psalm for time's sake. There's one more book to get to here. Psalm 139, but I want to look at a little bit of this. You're understanding what's going on here. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Right? Psalm 139, 1. And then notice the last 2 verses, 23 and 24. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. So God has already searched us and known us. But we need to submit to Him and say, Lord, I want you to search me and try me and deal with me. See, what David's going to do here in Psalm 139, verse 1 to 6, it's about the omniscience of God. He has all knowledge. And then verses 7 to 12, it's about His omnipresence. He's everywhere present. You can't get away from the presence of God. And then verse 13 to 16, it's His omnipotence. He has all power, demonstrated by how He forms us in our mother's womb. And then verses 17 to 24 is His response to all of this. But my point is, when you talk about the omniscience and the omnipresence and the omnipotence of God, that ought not to be some dried up theological textbook type of pursuit. It ought to be a living reality, so that it ought to be this: God, you know me. God, you're present with me. God, you made me. David is meditating on the Lord, and he's taking these attributes of God personally. He said, O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my down sitting and mine uprising. Thou understandest my thought afar off, and on and on. And then he said in verse 7, whither shall I go from thy spirit? Whither shall I flee from thy presence? And again in verse 13, you've covered me in my mother's womb. So you take it personal. It's one thing to know about God. Something else to know God in a real relationship, you see.